you for coming today. And today we'd like to acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging. And today we are on Camarungal lands, and I'd like to thank them for their ongoing custodianship that we are passing through today. And so before I hand over to Nigusie for his mid-candidature review, I'd like to introduce his panels. Coming up on my phone now. So the supervisory panel today is Associate Professor Taryn Sanders as principal and Dr. Beck Pagano. She's here as well somewhere. Thanks, Beck. And also today we have the chair, Professor Joseph Sirocci, as well as Professor Susie Edwards and Dr. Chloe Gordon, and we thank them for their time as well.
Thanks, Ruki, and thanks everyone for coming to my MCR presentation. This title is Understanding Demographic Factors Affecting the Spring Time. I'm a tutor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Awesome. And here is my presentation outline. I will have the background information about children's screen time, and I'll present my study one and study two result findings, and finally I will have my proposal for my study three. And the screen time among children is defined as the time spent while using any digital device like smartphone, television is considered as screen time, and it includes the duration and frequency and the purpose for engaging with the screen, and as well as the activities involved. And nowadays, children is often described as digital natives, in which screen-based activity is a part of their day-to-day activity. And these engagements make screen time highly prevalent, or it increases children's screen time. And this increase, this increasement in screen time become a public health concern due to its significant impact from children's development and well-being. And considering that these different countries and guidelines puts their set the guideline to limit screen time, and despite they have slight differences in their age-based limitations, the majority of guidelines share the following screen time limits: and no screen time for less than 2 years, and limit less than 1 hour per day for children 2 to 5 years, and limit less than 2 hours per day for children greater than 5 years. However, evidence also reported that the adherence to this guideline is very limited. If excessive screen time becomes a public health concern, and understanding who is the most affected is the most important, and as all is not equally affected, so we need to examine which factor is a driving for this difference. So demographic factor is considered as the foundation of children's behavior due to its direct effects to children's daily activities. And the existing evidence on this, on the relation between demographic factors and the screen time is inconsistent, and some have some neurological limitation, and there were also some unexplored demographic factors. So my thesis aim is to understand demographic factors that predict screen time using 3 complementary studies. My first study is systematic reviews to synthesize the existing evidence to identify which socio-demographic factors predict screen time. My second study will go to unexplored demographic factor, which is household transition using LSI data. And my third study goes to identify socio-demographic predictors of screen time, type, content, and context using a wearable objective measure of the screen time. So now my first step is systematic review and meta-analysis on socio-demographic factors and moderating variable influencing the screen time among school-age children. And the previous studies report an inconsistent findings. It makes it difficult which socio-demographic factor become the strong predictor of screen time. And the other limitation is the previous studies use different kinds of screen time measure, like parent report, child report, and kinds of digital measures. These different kinds of measure yield different estimates of the outcome variance of screen time that potentially affects the association between socio-demographic factors and the screen time. And the other is a COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, COVID-19 pandemic dramatically affects the trends of screen time, and its focus reliance on high digital device uses, and however, it is moderating effect was not tested. So my review aim is to identify socio-demographic factors of screen time and examine whether screen time measurement and COVID-19 pandemic moderate this association. And the protocol was registered in post period, and all peer-reviewed articles, which the main aim was to look at the social demographic factor and screen time were included. And the population group is school age and 6 to 12 years. All observational study designs were included, and no restriction on screen time, date, or language were put it. And however, having those no social demographic data, missing abstract or full text and editorial and not non-peer-reviewed works were excluded from this review. And my mesh and KOFs were arranged in PICO frameworks, and a comprehensive search were conducted across this 7 databases. And my extraction tool was Excel templates, and this information were extracted from the included studies. And I use the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute Quality Assessment Tool for observational, port, and cross-sectional study for my quality assessment. I used R software for my analysis. A total of 11 different types of effect measure were extracted, and this 11 effect size were converted to Pearson correlation using packages and custom formulas. Finally, a multi-level meta-analysis were used to identify socio-demographic factors, whereas meta-regression were used to evaluate the moderating effect of screen time and COVID-19 period. And other like heterogeneity analysis, publication bias, and sensitivity analysis also conducted. And a total of my searching in this, a total of 19,662 records, and after duplication removed 8,932 were left, and 460 were remain for full text screening. Finally, 92 studies were included in this review. And the included study were incorporated about more than 1.6 million participants with a mean age of 10.3, and about half of them were females, and about 60 articles were published in the last 7 years. And in terms of geographical distribution, 18 articles were published in United States, followed by Australia, China, Canada, and Netherlands. In terms of design, 75 were cross-sectional. And here the slide shows that the pooled association between social demographic factors and screen time. A total of 13 factors were included in the pooled analysis, and having a pooled results from 8 effect measures shows that having high grades children were positively associated with children screen time with a Pearson result of 0.170. And the pooled result from 76 effect measures shows that being males were significantly associated with screen time with a Pearson result of 0.117. And others like single parent family, minority ethnicity, child age, maternal employed maternal occupation were positively associated with screen time. However, maternal education, parent education, and large household size were associated with decrease in screen time. When we come to the moderator analysis of COVID-19 pandemic, as you can see from the table, all are non-significant except ethnicity. So the association between ethnicity and COVID-19 were moderated by the COVID-19 period, and it shows that it is slightly stronger during COVID-19 pandemic compared to outside the COVID-19 pandemic. When it comes to the moderate analysis of the measurement method, it's the association between child age and screen time were moderated by the measurement method, and it is more slightly stronger in child report screen time measure compared to the parent report. So the main finding of this review is that children's screen time is shaped by a combination of child and family-related social demographic factor, even though the effect size is small. So any policymakers or intervention need to target this high group high-risk groups like boys, older children, ethnic minorities, single-parent households, and families having a low parental education. When it comes to the moderating finding, this ethnicity screen time association was stronger during COVID-19 pandemic, and child age screen time association were stronger during child report compared to the parent report. So intervention for ethnic minority should be more stringent during crisis, during the pandemic, and as well as child report need to be more incorporated for older children. My second study goes to looking at the effect of household structure and its transition on children's screen time. And here is a basic graph of the previous study. There is a limited large-scale longitudinal study examining how household structure and its transition affect screen time. Particularly, there was no study looking at the effect of the transition on the transition on screen time. So this study aimed to examine how household structure and its transition affect the screen time and identify if there are any turning points following this household transition. And I used a longitudinal study of Australian children, and it is a nationally representative longitudinal cohort study, and started in 2003 and collected every 2 years. And I just consider both cohorts and with the age of 6 to 13 years. And the outcome variable is screen time, whereas the exposure variable is household structure, number of siblings, and household transition. GASL, maternal education or mother education, CIFA, indigenous status, child age, sex, and home language is considered as covariance. Here is my analytical pipeline, and I did data extraction from the large LSAC data, and then followed by data cleaning, basically removal of the outliers, and then followed the descriptive statistics. And then the cleaned data further goes to multiple imputation method for the missing. And using this inputted data, I did my multi-level mixed effect model to identify the effect of household structure and siblings on screen time. And the inputted data further goes to propensity score matching. And using this data, I did the piecewise regression to look at the effect of household transition on screen time. And here, why propensity score matching and piecewise regression is more comfortable to look at the household transition on the screen time. So children who experience household transition may systematically differ from that of the stable households, which makes it difficult whether the change in screen time among children is due to that of the transition itself or due to other systematically different. So propensity score matching pairs each transition children with a comparable child from the stable household that can balance the K factors or matching factors. So it helps us to look at the net effect of the transition rather than the other difference. The other piecewise regression is the best model for looking household transition is that it's the piecewise regression separates the trajectory into three categories: the pre-slope, the trend before the transition, and the level change, any immediate change during the transition, and the post-slope or the trend after the transition. So here is the descriptive statistics of LSAC data. A total of 8,706 participants were included, and throughout our study, a total of 32,390 observations were recorded. 51% were male, and with a mean age of 6.86. In terms of social demographic characteristics, both groups are comparable, and as well as they also comparable in terms of the total screen time among the and 12 words. And when we come to the multi-level mixed effect model to look at household structure and the screen time, the unadjusted model shows that the household structure is significantly associated with the screen time, while adding age and sex, still it is significant, and adding maternal education, it becomes non-significant, and adding other covariates, it becomes non-significant. So after adjusting the social demographic factors, the association between household structure and screen time become non-significant. And when we come to the association between number of siblings and the screen time, and in unadjusted, it is significant, and even the final model adjusting for all social demographic factors, that is still significant. So each additional serving was associated with a 22.7 fewer minutes of weekly screen time after adjusting the social media coverage. And the other research question of this study is looking at the household transition and the screen time. And before the analysis, the total number of children were classified into 5 groups. Those lives in stable two-parent households, those children lives in stable single-parent household, those having two single-parent transition, single to two-parent transition, and having multiple transition. And it means a transition from single to and then single, having multiple transitions. So the first precise regression model is a transition from single to two-parent transition. So the graph shows that the steps of the model buildings. The blue line shows that those children's lives in a stable household. It means a stable single-parent households. Whereas the yellow lines, the orange line shows that those having a transition experience. And this graph shows that how the two groups look like before matching. And the second graphs look like how it looks like after matching. The difference becomes null. It is directly due to the effect of this matching. And this graph shows that how the trajectory looks like the pre-transition and post-transition. And this is the final building, which is model prediction. And as you can see from the graph, there is a slight decrease at the transition in the transition group or treatment group, so which is called this minus 49. So the level change as the transition is minus 49 among the treatment group compared to the control group, but it is not significant. Or we can interpret as a transition, the treatment group, it means those having a transition from single to two-parent transition showed 49 minutes per week drop relative to the controls, but it is not significant. And the pre-slope and post-slope also not significant. The second model is almost nearly similar with that of the previous. The transition from two to single-parent transition, it follows the same steps. It shows that the level changes at the transition is about 18.45. It means as the transition, the treatment group, which is those having a transition from two to single-parent transition, showed 18 minutes per week increase relative to controls or the stable two-parent households, but it is still not significant. The pre-slope and post-slope difference also not significant. So the key finding from this study is that household structure was not independently associated with the screen time, and the household transition also doesn't create a significant change in the screen time trajectory, as well as doesn't cause a significant shift in the screen time during the transition. However, more siblings were associated with less screen time. So intervention to reduce screen time needs to target household structure, not target household structure and its transition. Rather, they need to focus as indicators for socio-demographic inequalities. My third study goes to looking the socio-demographic predictors of screen time, duration, type, content, and context. And the main limitation of the previous study is they mainly focus on the single construct, which is total duration, rather than the types of the screen time, the content, and the context. And the other limitation is they mainly rely on the subjective kinds of screen time measures. And now this study uses an objective variable camera screen time measures. So the main aim is to identify socio-demographic factors that predict the screen time across multiple dimensions like duration, type, content, and context. And this is a community-based cross-sectional study, and the participants were children aged 7 to 10 years, and the data collection technique were an automated variable camera. And this is the analysis plan, assumption checking, and an independent linear mixed effect model were applied for each types of constructors to identify the factors. And the finding of this third study will help to understand holistic understanding of the screen time predictors. And it also helps us, the parents, to understand what drives their children's screen time behavior beyond the duration. And this is my timeline. And finally, I want to thank my supervisor, Taran and Vic, for their unreserved guidance and support. And see what about. Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause. Well done, Nigusie. Thank you. Joseph, floor is yours.
Yes, I think we normally start with the expert panel members. Can you guys hear me okay?
That's fine. Susie?
Okay, Susie.
Thank you very much. Congratulations on your presentation, Nigusie, and two very thorough pieces of work, which I enjoyed very much. I think that both sets of your findings will be very useful for people that work in this area and in practice as well. My commentary is mainly around the framing of the two studies and the justification for the work. So I think maybe just try and have a look a little bit more carefully at the literature around children and digital technologies, so as to use digital natives. And that sort of concept and terms largely sort of not really used very often in the area. There's a lot of work to show that children don't actually just learn to use technologies as natives, but there's a lot of sociocultural practices and learning processes that are going on there. And I forgot my second point. You'll have to come back to me. Can you put your first slide back up?
Back to slide number 1.
Yeah. Oh, so much work. The next, keep going. Can you go one more? Yes. So the logic that you've got there is that if you position children as digital natives, that's leading to the increase in children's screen time. So maybe revisit the notion of digital natives and then have a look at what the literature is saying about how and why else understanding in the increase is occurring. That sort of doesn't really matter for the purposes of the work you're doing. But a lot of thinking in the education refers to sort of a post-digital period of time in society, which is sort of reflecting the notion that the children are not living in digital or non-digital times, and so that they're always with technologies. Also, and again, this is probably subject specific, so maybe not the case for you in psychology. In education, we're increasingly using the notions of screen engagements or interactions and not time, but that might not necessarily work for you, given you have specifically looked at time spent on screens. Though I did notice that your definition of screen time, if you just go to your definition of screen time, actually, so it's including duration, frequency, purposes and activities. But that's sort of something for you to discuss with your supervisors, but you might be able to just expand on that a little bit at some point. I really like your finding about siblings. I think that's really fascinating. And I think that you've got two very nicely developed studies there, and I look forward to seeing more of your work.
Thank you, Professor Edwards. Chloe?
Yeah, congratulations, Nigusie, on what you've achieved up until this point. I agree with what Susie said, really. I was really impressed by your written work and your presentation. I thought you presented your findings really clearly, and both studies appear to be really well executed and of high quality. So, and yeah, some really interesting findings that I think will be valuable to the literature. So yeah, well done. I was just going to ask you to speak a bit more to study 3. So could you just tell us a bit more about how you see the findings there as, I guess, providing additional information from what study 1 and study 2 has provided? Are you expecting the findings to confirm what study 1 and study 2 has found? Or are there, is there additional information that you expect it to uncover?
Yeah, study 1 is more focused about reviewing the previous literatures and what is the social demographic factors that affect the screen time. And as well as I also consider some moderating variables, whether this association is moderated by the measurement method or COVID-19 pandemic, but the main aim is to look at the social demographic factors that affect the screen time. As the previous study report an inconsistent findings in the relation between social demographic factor and screen time. This review mainly identifies some of the social demographic factors that have an effect on screen time, even though the association seems slightly weakly associated. And this is the first study. And my second study is that the previous study was just looking at a static like household structure with that of screen time. And they didn't look at how the transitions affect the screen time. This is the main unexplored demographic factor that we consider here in my study. So the main findings of my study too is that the effect of there is no significant effect between the household structure and the screen time. Or household structure does not significantly affect the screen time, and the transition also does not cause a significant change in the screen time. Rather, so policymakers need to consider other inequalities between the two groups, between the two or two parent or single parent households. This is my second study, and my last study is that the previous study mostly used the subjective kinds of measures, subjective screen time measures, whether they use the parent report and child report. But my last study uses a wearable camera, which is a novel objective measure of screen time. It is considered as the most accurate. So this is one advantage of my last study. My second advantage of my last study is that it's not limited to the screen time duration, and I just plan to look at the predictors for the type, the content, and the context, and maybe the further detail analysis will be this. I will work on that. Yeah, this is all about.
Anything else to add, Chloe?
No, all good, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Joseph, back to you as chair.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions before I release it to the public. In your quality assessment, you used, so I'll just have a couple technical questions for study 1 and then a more general question for study 2. I think this is more like revise and resubmit kind of questions. I think this is very high quality research. So I'll start with that. But your quality assessment, you used multiple raters, but with extraction, did you just use a single person?
Yeah, the extraction was in the year. But the quality assessment was done by 2 reviewers.
Yeah, I wonder it would be not too intensive to have a second person extract some part of it, just to look at reliability of extraction. But I'll leave that to you and the team. Also, you mentioned use of custom formulas. There's a wide variety of effects, and I've done these meta-analysis. It can be crazy. Is there any sensitivity analysis? Does it matter if you, say, exclude the ones with the custom formulas? You know, can you show us that the decision of how it was, what formulas were used makes any difference at all? Is there a way to do that?
Sorry?
So you know how you used in study 1, you had to convert all the effect sizes and you had to use different formulas and things like that. I'm just wondering if there's a sensitivity analysis you can do that kind of shows that what you're finding is kind of independent of what formulas you choose to use or what assumptions you made with the formulas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, despite they may have slight limitation, like converting the exact effective measure to pixel may have slight limitation. Despite that, it is better to pull the overall effect of the screen time, social demographic factor on the screen time, rather than just leaving some effective measures as it is and pulling some of the linear measure of screen time. It is better to consider like some of the effective measure were directly converted using the package based about 7 out of 11, while the
Yeah.
4 effective measure were use the custom formulas. So
Okay,
there is
yeah.
literatures, they use the custom formula to convert those effective measures into
Yeah. Yeah, it might just be good just to show in supplementary materials, when you do use the custom formulas, just to show that it's a basic trend. I don't think it's critical, but just to show that nothing crazy happens when we do that. If you want a sensitivity analysis of that sort. Just something to think about. For study 2, you conclude that you don't need to target household structure. And so what I'd like you to do is reflect on what you can conclude from your data and what might be limitations to that conclusion that you do not need to target household structure.
Yeah, thanks. It is good question actually. Of course, no target, sorry, maybe is a word, but there is to more focus on social demographic inequalities rather than giving more emphasis to the screen time, the household structure. Of course, the main limitation of this longitudinal study is that as we know, the data is collected every 2 years. So this may not exactly estimate the level of change or the level of change brings the transition or the acute effects of that transition, since the data is collected every 2 years. So I have
and it's also parent reported. Yeah. So I think it might be a good idea to soften the conclusion that you should not target household structure. I mean, maybe, yeah. But other than that's really kind of my comments. So I'd like to open it to the floor for questions.
Thanks, Joseph. Questions here? Couple? Yeah, Reinhard.
So this is really interesting research, and I mean you got in the meta-analysis, but also in the longitudinal Australian study, really big samples, which really is an advantage. Now my question would be: all these demographic variables are kind of distal to what you're trying to explain, screen time, right? So there are any kinds of variables in between, and that also may explain why the effects are not that strong. What are your thoughts about mediating mechanism? If you take, for example, gender, so what you find is that male children, boys, more screen time than girls. Why? So what are the mechanisms in between, right? I mean, you could answer yourself this question for each and every variable, and we don't have the time to do it for all of them. But let's take gender. What's the reason?
Yeah, of course. Slightly gender male, being male is highly associated with the screen time. That is basically male have slightly more autonomous compared to female. So this autonomy, this independency will have give the chance to use their screen time or any digital activities in many, as this is the study conducted, including all over the world. In many cultures, male is slightly having a good opportunity or autonomy to use everything. So this may be one of the mechanisms that being male is slightly associated with the screen time.
Would you have the chance to explore that empirically using the existing data?
Yeah, with this one, it is about by 0.117 is associated with screen time compared to females. This is the result of the systematic, but the mechanism is what I said is that it may be like in many cultures, being male is more advantageous and more autonomous, not controlled by the parents, and it may give an opportunity to use this strategy.
Okay.
I get your question, mate. Have I get your concern?
What's that?
I get your concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my question would be, I mean, for the future, would you have an opportunity to empirically examine these thoughts about mediator mechanisms, right? Okay, but that's just a comment, that's it, yeah.
Okay, Rohan, any other questions? Perfect.
I was surprised that the effect sizes for almost everything that you were looking at were so small. I mean, I would have expected some of them. And so what is it that predicts screen time?
Yeah, of course, there is, for example, 13 factors were included in the meta analysis. Among them, 9 of them becomes associated with the screen time. 4 is not associated with the screen time. And those factors is under the category of low associations. Like all is less than 0.2, it is considered as the weak association. Despite this, with a large sample size, this weak association may have an impact on large population, large intervention. So it is better to consider this as the most important findings. Yeah. So the first is like differentiating the among 13 factors, 9 become associated, and those 9 also have slight difference. Like for example, having high grade level is more associated with the screen time, with Pearson population near to 2, slightly stronger than the others. Even though the others also weak, having a large intervention may have an impact on the level of the screen time.
All right, given the time, I'll stop the questions there, but thank you very much. So one more round of applause from Nigusie. Thank you. Well, with that, and that concludes today's mid-candidature review. Joseph, Susie, and Chloe, can I ask you to stay on the line for the deliberations? Thank you. Thank you to everyone here and online. Such a